Settlers from what the Israelis call Ophira and the Arabs call Sharm el-Sheikh got Prime Minister Begin's promise to ask President Sadat to hear their request to remain in their homes after Ophira, or Sharm, is returned to the Egyptians next year. By whatever name, its desert robes of beauty and tranquility hide the painful price of peace for those who settled here. Howard Rosenstein from
a jeep or half, sometimes it can go away with a camel to get to where you have to go.
The Israelis have preserved the unique, almost virgin ecology of beautiful reefs, clear waters, and infinite variety of sea life, with strict laws prohibiting fishing and even the collecting of seashells. Rosenstein helped build the tourist industry by developing a scuba diving business now worth over $500,000.
We're dealing with, in this area, immediate area, about 20,000 divers a year. And it's a multi-million-dollar tourist enterprise. And it has every capability of achieving a potential that will rival maybe the areas on the Riviera or the Caribbean.
Thus, the economic as well as personal loss will be enormous. Rosenstein has dual Israeli-American citizenship. His 3 children were born here, and he wants to stay if the Egyptians will allow it.
It would be a shame if it becomes an area of political dominoes, or checkers, where people move people around and in and out and things like that.
On Thursday, they will put their plea to remain to President Sadat when he meets Prime Minister Begin.
We're political refugees today. In many respects, we're similar to the Palestinians.
But until the Palestinian problem is solved, Sadat is not likely to permit Israelis to remain on Egyptian soil. Bill Siemens, ABC News, Sharm el-Sheikh.
There aren't many places in the world you can slap an air bottle on your back, go down 30 feet or so, and watch the sharks go by. In fact, just about the only place you can do it with some hope of living to tell the story is in the Red Sea off Ras Mohammed, the southernmost tip of the Sinai. And even here, divers are afraid they might not be able to do it much longer. The sharks living off the coral reefs here are among the most accessible in the world to scientists, to photographers, to intrepid divers. Up until now, at least, they've been very friendly. But this whole area, all of the Sinai, is in the midst of a political transition right now, and believe it or not, the sharks are caught up in it. For the last 12 years, the sharks have been swimming in Israeli waters. They're about to become Egyptian. Anwar Sadat is gradually regaining control of the entire desert and its territorial waters. Israel is giving up what it conquered by force and what it learned to love and protect. The Israeli occupation may have been controversial politically, but ecologically it was a masterpiece. The Israelis set up nature reserves. They passed and enforced tough legislation protecting wildlife on the sands and in the sea. As Americans were instrumental in orchestrating the peace between Egypt and Israel, Americans are getting involved now in pressing for continued conservation, particularly of the magnificent coral reefs off Ras Mohammed. Marine biologist Dr. Eugenia Clark, professor of zoology at the University of Maryland, is spearheading a campaign aimed at convincing Sadat that what he's getting under these waters is worth taking care of.
The Egyptians don't have a conservation program developed yet. They are very much aware of the problem and they're starting to develop it, but they're like just infants in this field, and the Israelis have really worked out all the problems. They don't allow spearfishing, they don't allow any abuse of the reefs and marine life, because people come out here and they think each person wants to take back one shell, one piece of coral, one shell. They think, what harm is that? But when you get thousands of people coming to one area and picking off the prettiest shells and corals, you have nothing left in no time. I think it's the most beautiful place in the whole world.
Dr. Clark went to Cairo recently to take her case to the president. Sadat responded by sending a small team of Egyptian officials, scientists, and scholars to Ras Mohammed, the first such trip made overland in almost 25 years. They were subjected to 3 days of well-intentioned Israeli propaganda on how they, the Egyptians, should take care of their land and their waters. There was a hike through granite mountains which plunged right down to the sea. There was a cruise through the Straits of Tiran, where Egyptian guns once threatened Israeli shipping and triggered 2 wars. It was a quiet exercise in normalization, diving diplomacy. The message from Israelis to Egyptians: if you don't control and restrict developers, fishermen, tourists, and divers, the incredible underwater world here can disappear within a few months. And Dr. Clark warned that among the first to leave would be the sharks.
Wherever you have a lot of divers, or especially divers with spearfishing, you don't find sharks anymore. And sharks are still, they're such beautiful creatures. Everybody gets a big kick and a thrill out of seeing sharks.
David and Ann Duboulay go into shark-infested waters the way some people hop on a commuter train or drive to the office. The Dubolays are contract photographers for the National Geographic. They're here with Dr. Clark to do a photographic essay on sharks. The Dubolays have shot more than a dozen underwater stories for the Geographic, but for them there's no place like Ras Mohammed and no subject like a shark.
I've always been totally fascinated with sharks. I think they have a kind of a mythical quality. The shark is a kind of a combination of a machine and an animal. Very few animals that look like jet planes yet have eyes. And the eyes are cold and dark and almost without feeling.
Well, I think that there's a lot of bad press for sharks right now, if you will, and I feel very warmly towards them. As a matter of fact, I feel that they're my friends. We've been diving with them now for 2 weeks straight and seen them in groups of 10 to 12 on every dive, and it seems that each day they get more and more used to our presence, and they come in closer and closer to the lens. And
slowly they'll come toward us, and very slowly then suddenly there is something out there. Excuse me. Stop for a second. That's not a dolphin. That is not a dolphin. Slow up. There's a big fin following us, and it's not a dolphin.
Like any world leader, Anwar Sadat receives a lot of petitions, hears a lot of pleas. This is one he probably hasn't heard before. Save the sharks. Bob Simon, CBS News, in the Red Sea.
Sharm el-Sheikh, in the southern Sinai, where great reaches of rocky, inhospitable desert suddenly give way to warm, crystal-clear water and the startling world beneath its surface. 10 years ago, Howard Rosenstein left a life of religious study to come here and build a new career as an underwater photographer and diving instructor. In 5 months, he will have to leave.
I'm giving up more than most, if not more than anybody else, because of the lifestyle I have here and the achievements that I've had. I'm talking about 18-hour days, day in and day out, and under pretty trying physical conditions here for many years. And now it's starting to be fun. As you can see, some coming with my family and friends sailing on a Saturday off, and these are things that I never did 5 or 6 years ago.
Rosenstein's company is the largest recreational diving operation in a place that has become an international tourist attraction. The Egyptians may ask him to stay as a consultant.
But if in my way I could help to keep this beautiful coastline as a recreation area and open to tourists from around the world and make sure it doesn't return to its pre-1967 definition of a military camp, then that's a very important goal for me.
Rosenstein's uncertainty about his future is shared by Israelis all over that part of the Sinai that will return to Egypt next April. They wonder what will happen to the hotels catering to tourists who flock to the beaches, and what will happen to the fields of crops carefully nurtured from the desert sand.
There were no gardens, no roads, nothing. And we moved in the houses, into the houses, and only later we started building the roads and the gardens around the houses, and trees. We planted trees and everything, and slowly it became to what it is today.
It's really tragic. We've seen it grow from sand to green, and now it's going back to brown again.
The Rubenenkos and the other residents of Neviot will be well compensated by Israel for leaving the hotel they built and the factory that packs their melons. The money helps, but they don't know where they will go or how they will find a life like the one they are leaving. It was a search for a better quality of life that brought Alfredo and Susan Wachs to their cooperative farming community in the north of the Sinai. After next April, they won't be able to grow the flowers they have been successfully exporting to Europe. Their new home will be just inside the Israeli border, and Susan worries about her 4 sons.
I don't know what it would mean to live in that area. I don't know what security problems we'll have there, what children will be allowed to do, actually. We don't want to leave here. I mean, it's just been so good. I don't think we want to believe that we're leaving.
The Wachs are resigned to leaving, but some of their neighbors have organized a movement to stop the withdrawal because they are angry and bitter about giving up their piece of the desert. Ella Weitzman and her militant associates believe Israel is making a mistake if it gives back the rest of the Sinai.
We definitely believe that the Camp David agreements are not peace, are, as far as Israel is concerned, are almost like committing suicide. We have conquered these sand dunes 3 times with our blood, 1 time with our sweat when we made the desert bloom. It will be very hard to take me out of here, but I will definitely not shoot an Israeli soldier.
Ella Weitzman's husband was one of the settlers who violently resisted the first phase of Israel's evacuation from the Sinai in March of 1979. It was not until the sad spectacle of Israelis fighting Israelis ended that a truce was declared and the settlers reluctantly withdrew. There are real fears the same thing will happen again. The future is also cloudy for the Bedouin. As each new conqueror has come to the Sinai, the nomadic tribesmen have found new ways to live. Under Israeli occupation, jobs have been plentiful, but after the withdrawal, many of those jobs will be gone. For the Bedouin, the desert is their home, and they only want to live in peace. It is the search for peace that will return the rest of the Sinai to Egypt next April.
And I believe that we should give peace a chance, and that's why if the price that we personally have to pay is leaving the place, partly that's what we have to do.
It's very hard to evaluate 10 years of a person's life, and I gave the best 10 years of my life in that respect. And that thing can't be compensated. I mean, that's all. I mean, that's just something that's gone into the wind or the water, and it's gone. And that's sad.
Art Kent, NBC News, Sharm el-Sheikh.
My name is Howard Rosenstein. I came to Israel 12 years ago from Los Angeles, California. I'm the owner and manager of the Red Sea Diving Center in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai. Divers coming to this area a year between, in the Sinai part, I would say about 20,000 a year. Average stay is about 8 days, so you're talking about 160,000 diving days. And this, in comparison to when we used to wait sometimes a week before a diver would show up, it's quite a different feeling. The area has the capability. It has the quality which attracts people. And as soon as that commodity was known, then it was something like a dam bursting, and you're not able to stop it. The equipment that we have at the diving center because diving is a very technical sport. In other words, man was not created to breathe under the water, or else he would have been born with gills. It has to be of the highest professional quality. And because I grew up in the States, and because the United States is very advanced in this field, we bring in all of our equipment from the United States. Up until now, we have 3 nice diving boats, about 200 sets of equipment, which enables us to deal with groups up to 100 divers, knowing that they can get reliable services in this far corner of the world. What we're looking at here is what the Israeli government prepared for the infrastructure of the community that was to be built by the people on an individual basis. In the far background, we have the town that was established in 1976, and that was governmental housing for rent. And the idea was to prepare a pre-planned community, which included built-in electrical lines, sewage, water, the roads, lighting and everything, and then the people were supposed to come and, according to some agreed plan, build their own private homes, which overlook the very tip of the Sinai off to the right here, the beautiful bay just below us, the beautiful beaches, and this was going to be the future of Sharm el-Sheikh right over here. When we started dealing with architects and preparing the plans by 1978 was the Camp David breakthrough and the Sadat's visit. Actually, in the end of 77, I think it was Sadat's visit. So everybody was holding back and waiting to see what would happen. And then when it became evident that the area was going to go back, there was a complete freeze.
I saw spending the rest of my life here. I had no intention of leaving this area. This was going to be our first home. We were going to build it and raise our children here, and that was the end of that. I feel very ambivalent about leaving. I hope it's worthwhile. I don't know what the future is in store for us concerning this area and our own personal lives. My only hope, and I think the price would be worthwhile, is that firstly there is peace. The fact that we have to leave here, well, I wasn't completely prepared for it. It's been 3 years, it's a process, but I think that initially I hope that we'd be able, being real peace, would be able to somehow stay here.
We came to this area as visitors at first and guests. The Bedouin, the people of the desert, the people who really, this is their home from time immemorial, and I've tried my best to be sensitive to this reality, and although they're people who work according to a different clock and a different philosophy in life, they're very special people. And I've had some very close relationships with the Bedouins that I've gotten to know through work, through meetings. I have great respect for them. And I think it's very important that the Bedouin are taken into consideration during this whole process, because they're going to be affected no less than the people that have to leave, and maybe even more so. The Sinai is the playground of Israel. It's where a whole generation of young Israelis have been able to feel footloose and feel free. And the Sinai was like a place where young Israelis would go and just come down, not only young Israelis, families too, older people, just to get away from that pressure. This is the first experience in history where people have come here for purely peaceful reasons to live with nature, develop nature, and offer nature to the world at large. And it should be appreciated, especially by the people who are coming to take over the area. We have the most beautiful coral reefs in the world, an untouched area where all the elements involved, water clarity, water temperature, quiet seas, colors, proximity, all come together and create an unbelievable experience for the snorkeler, for the diver. This all combines for an unbelievable experience, a recreational one, an educational one, an emotional one. Okay, come and see my world. How was it?
Oh, Jesus. Man, there's nothing like that.
I see myself as a victim of the peace process. I think perhaps even more so than anybody else, and simply because what I do with my livelihood and what my life is completely 100% connected to this region. Well, we came here 10 years ago, and now we have to leave.
The legions of men who have marched through the Sinai has been endless. There have been Mamelukes, Crusaders, British, French, Turks, Israelis, and Egyptians. These people, the Bedouin, are as constant as the scenery. This is the Sinai, a wonderland of contrasts. It is a land of sharp peaks and soft dunes, a land of gentle colors and harsh realities. It is an arid landscape. Its 15,000 permanent inhabitants have spent centuries molding their existence to the conditions of scarcity. It is a land whose beauty is defined by the eye of the beholder. For the past 14 years, the Israelis have been here, the area having been conquered from the Egyptians in 1967. They settled the Red Sea coast, building villages, building tourism, and making the desert bloom. The Sinai became the flower supplier to Europe, and its beaches drew hundreds of thousands from around the world. They brought water here to where it was scarce, and built towns where none had been, like this one here at Sharm el-Sheikh. Divers have come away enchanted from waters which are so clear that one can see a full moon from a depth of 150 feet. Roads were forged through unrelenting mountains. There was dynamic movement, a movement totally incongruous with the tranquil passivity of the landscape and its people. But somehow it merged. The Israelis learned the ways of the locals, and the locals quickly learned which services were needed and therefore lucrative. A bond was knitted based on a Bedouin understanding that it was both temporary and propitious, just like pacts made with those who have come before and those who will come after. And now, uncertainty. On April the 26th, the last of the Israelis will leave. Army bases, which were once a source of income for the Bedouin, have already packed up and left. Settlements like these have locked their gates, and their houses remain abandoned. Hotels and guest villages are closing, their lawns being covered by weeds. Yards left unkempt. Families are packing up houses, and neighbors of yesterday will be dispersed. Once busy commercial airfields have ground to a halt, and the Israeli army is winding down its presence. Minefields remain intact, a sorry monument to the endless armies which have fought here. The Egyptians will be arriving on April 26, and with them a multinational force, for which huge camps are being built. The Bedouin remain unsure as always of what their new role will be. Will they inherit what the Israelis have left behind, or will they continue to live as they have for centuries? It is a long road out of the Sinai, a landscape that will remain inviolate and untouched by politics. It is a land of contrasts, beyond the touch of man, that has remained untouched by war, heat and drought from the time of Moses and before. It was here that God chose to reveal himself, and continues to do so behind each rock and beneath each wave.
scenes have all the appearances of war, of conflict, violence, strife. In fact, all the army is trying to do is to implement the conditions of a peace. Even at a time when Britain was on the edge of its own war, one tiny settlement on the borders of desert Arabia was kept in the headlines day after day and night after night. The people involved could be numbered in hundreds, even on peak days of protest, only a few thousand. Few were local. Most were Jewish extremists here specially to take part in the skirmishing, to keep the battle alive. But they spread the name Yamit across the world. It was a pity their campaign was so successful, for the ugliness of these over-photographed scenes will spoil the memory of the last days in Sinai. For they are not only trying to stop the evacuation of Yamit, they want to make sure the second installment of the price of peace, autonomy for the million Arabs of the West Bank, is never paid. That the 24,000 settlers with guns stay there forever. An event which could have lived in the history books as an honorable evacuation of occupied land for the sake of peace between Egyptian and Israeli may now be recalled as days of self-interest, of political and religious extremism. These days could even be remembered as the first days of the War of the Camp David Agreement, which will be fought on other ground. Anyone could understand the sense of triumph